Today, as we come together, we're actually in the midst of this conversation called Be Rich. If you haven't been with us, for the past several weeks, all of our groups have been moving through Financial Peace University together. And as they're moving through Financial Peace University, we've been having kind of two different conversations here on Sunday. The first conversation was about how we develop and build that relationship with Him. How can we deepen our relationship with God? And we've looked at these individuals who had incredible relationships with God and what made that possible. And then for the last couple of weeks, we've been moving through some of the really unique things that God teaches us about our finances and looking at, okay, how do we follow Him in this? And next week, we're going to get the opportunity to be able to celebrate. And you're going to hear stories of what God's been doing. I'm going to share with you a lot of what's happened inside of those groups. But today, we're kind of bringing the conversation to a close. And as we do that, I want to talk to you about where we're going. I've said from the beginning, we're going somewhere. We're going somewhere. I want to talk to you about where we're going. Because this conversation for us and Financial Peace University for us, it's not just about impacting our church family in a moment. It's about something much bigger than that. It's about creating a culture within our church family. It's about shaping who we are and not only charting our course, but really defining, okay, how are we going to do this together? And so as we've moved through this, there's a couple of things that we've been working to do. One is we've been working to create a shared language. We want to be talking about this in the same way. And the thing that's really exciting about that is it's happening. And so you have over 800 people who know exactly what I mean when I say we're going to live like no one else so that we can live and give like no one else. We have over 800 people who know what I'm talking about when I talk about an emergency fund. We have over 800 people who know what I'm talking about when I talk about a budget committee meeting, because we've been moving through this together. Now we have a shared language. If you've gone through this with your spouse, you know the benefit of that, because all of a sudden you're on the same page together. And your conversations get so much more productive because you're talking about it the same way. And for many of us, I know this was true for me and Anna, before we moved through this together, we were sometimes using the same words, but we were thinking about them in very different ways. And when we developed a shared language, it changed everything. And one of the things that we've been working towards, and one of the reasons why this is so significant in our family, is because it helps us do that. And when we can understand each other better, we can help each other grow better. And so we've been working to develop that shared language. In addition to that, we've been working to break down the stigma around money conversations. And I know when we began this, and I invited you to join Financial Peace University, some of you are like, wait, you want me to talk to people about money for 9 weeks? I don't talk to anybody about money. And there's kind of this stigma of we can talk about everything else in my life, but I'm not going to talk about my finances. But you trusted us, and now we only have 1 week left. You've been talking to a group of people about money for 8 weeks, and you made it. You're okay. You made it through the other side. It wasn't nearly what you thought it was going to be. And you actually found it to be helpful. It's so destructive. And I've said this a couple times during this series. Whenever we start to compartmentalize, we're in trouble. And it's so destructive when we step into community with part of who we are and not all of who we are. Because when we do that, we can't really help one another grow. And so we step into our groups and we're willing to talk about everything else in our life except for our finances. And some of you have experienced this. There's this cancer developing over here, but because there's this stigma around talking about money, you didn't share it with anybody until it got really bad. And by that point, nobody could help. It doesn't matter what area of life we're talking about. Anytime you compartmentalize and you walk into community and you say, I'm going to be known everywhere but here, you're in trouble. You're in trouble. And so we've been working to change that, where you can walk into group at any time. You can be part of this community at any time. Talk about, man, my emergency fund is dwindling and all these things keep happening. And there's all these people around you who understand what you're talking about and can encourage you in that and help you in that. We get to help one another grow together. This series is not just about impacting a moment. It's about changing the culture of our church, creating a culture where we're engaging this aspect of life together, helping each other grow, and going somewhere together. And again, I've said from the beginning of this series, we're going somewhere, we're going somewhere, we're going somewhere. And today what I want to do is I want to walk you through where it is that we're going. And I want to chart the course for us as far as where we believe God is calling us. And this has everything to do with us following Him. Years ago, we sat down as a team and we realized that, one, we had not done a very good job of actually living out 1 Timothy and teaching these things to our people. But the other thing that we realized is that we didn't have a really great grasp on what does it mean to follow God financially. As a matter of fact, if I were to go around this room and I were to ask you, what does it mean to follow God financially? Most of you would tell me, well, you have to be generous. Most of you, almost all of you would talk to me about giving. Most of you, that's all you'd talk about. Because you thought, before we began to move through this, you thought that was all there was to following God financially. But there's so much more than that. And our Father has instructed us in so much more than that. And if we're going to experience a life that's truly life, we have to change the way that we think about what it means to follow Him financially. And as we began to work through that, we identified several commitments that here at Hoboken Grace we've been making for years now, at different times in different ways, as to what it means to follow God in this area of our life. And so I want to walk you through that today, because this is where we're going. The first commitment is this: I acknowledge daily that 100% of my resources belong to God. The earth is the Lord's and everything in it, Psalm 24:1. We talked about this last week. Everything belongs to Him. I'm not the owner, I'm just the manager. I don't carry the weight of provision. That's His to carry. I just manage what it is that He's given me. I don't own anything. Listen to me. There will come a day for all of us when we own nothing. The question is whether you will engage it that way before that day or after. And God says, no. Well, wait. Everything is mine. I'm giving this to you. And the commitment we're making is I'm going to manage that well. I want to stand before Him one day and say, I did the best with what it is that you gave me. That's the commitment that we're making, which means, number two, that we commit to actually assigning every dollar a name, spending it on paper and on purpose first. So we're going to tell our money where to go. We're not going to wonder where it went. And some of you have begun to do this. You've begun the practice of laying out that budget on a monthly basis. It's not just this static thing that lives in a drawer anymore. You've begun to actually practicing updating that on a monthly basis. Listen to me. Stick to it. It's hardest at first. When Anna and I first started this, there are all these different conversations that we had to have. And at first, it was tricky. But the more that we did it, the better we got at it. And a lot of those conversations you have to have once. You don't have to have them over and over and over again. Stick to it. And don't just create it, actually track it. Actually track it. We're going to tell our money where to go. We're not going to wonder where it went. Luke 14:28. But don't begin until you count the cost, for who would begin construction of a building without first calculating the cost to see if there's enough money to finish it? We're going to develop the plan, execute the plan. And then number 3, we're going to commit to eliminate all debt and live debt-free. We're going to commit to tackling debt. And this isn't to say that there aren't times where you're going to have to step into debt. We talked about mortgages. We've talked about all of these things if you've been moving through financial peace with us. But it's the idea that we are not going to live our lives in the state of debt. And we're going to understand it and talk about it the way that God talks about it. And I want to stop here for a second and talk about something that I think is really significant as it pertains to this. Because whenever we move through this, and this is the second time that we've walked through Be Rich here at Hoboken Grace, and both times, the pushback that I get is always around debt. The most significant pushback that I get is around debt, specifically credit cards. Specifically credit cards. And we'll be talking about this, and someone will come up to me and say, well, you don't understand. You don't understand. You got to be able to use the credit card the right way. And if you use the credit card the right way, you can get these points. And they start talking me through this system that they have. And they live their life off of points. And it's the most amazing thing. Or someone will come up to me and talk about leveraging debt as well. You need to be able to leverage debt to be able to, and they'll show me their system. And yeah, I understand. I understand. But when it comes to this, there's another principle that I think we need to pay attention to. It's something that Paul teaches to the church at Corinth as they're in the midst of a division. And there's something that's causing a divide inside their church. And so Paul writes to them about it, and his solution to it is to introduce a principle. Let me take you to this moment. So it starts off, it's found in 1 Corinthians. Now about food sacrificed to idols. Now starting that way, most of you are thinking, what? What does this have anything to do with finance? Stick with me. He says, now about food sacrificed to idols. Now, let me explain the divide here. So inside the church, there were those who looked at, because at the time, the way that you would worship certain idols is that you would go to the temple and you would go there and you would make an offering. So you would sacrifice part of the food to the idol and then you would eat the rest of the food. And inside of the Jewish law, you were not allowed to do that. You could not eat that food. It was seen as worshiping that idol. And that's what oftentimes they were doing. They brought the food to worship the idol and make the sacrifice. But after Jesus came, and after he gave his life, the followers of Jesus realized, the idol's nothing. The idol's nothing. And the reality is that I can eat that food without actually worshiping that God. I know it's not a real God. And so they'd begun to eat the food sacrificed to idols. And there was this massive divide. So Paul writes, now about food sacrificed to idols. And I love the way these next few phrases play out. He says, we know that we all possess knowledge. He says, I know you guys have learned some things. I understand. You've gained some knowledge. Then he says this is really significant. Knowledge puffs up, but love builds up. He says, I know you've learned some things, but I want to remind you, knowledge puffs up, love builds up. And here he speaks to something that Jesus addressed multiple times as he was teaching. And he would talk about the yeast of the Pharisees. So he would tell his disciples, beware the yeast of the Pharisees. What is he talking about? He's talking about the knowledge that puffs up. It's this idea that you gain knowledge, but rather than it leading to application, you following God better, or rather than it leading to you loving better, it leads to pride. And so he says, I know that you've learned some things, but remember, knowledge puffs up, love builds up. Then he says this, the man who thinks he knows something does not yet know as he ought to know. He says, I know you've learned some things, but I don't think you know as much as you think you know. But the man who loves God is known by God, continuing the contrast. So then, about eating food sacrificed to idols. We know that an idol is nothing at all in the world, and that there is no God but one. For even if there are so-called gods, whether in heaven or on earth, as indeed there are many gods and many lords, and he's talking about spiritual powers, and he's saying, no, there is a reality of spiritual powers, but we know that these idols aren't gods, and we know that there's only one God above all spiritual powers. He says, yet for us there is but one God, the Father, from whom all things came and for whom we live. And there is but one Lord, Jesus Christ, through whom all things came and through whom we live. So he starts off and it sounds like he's saying, yeah, it's fine. You can eat the food sacrificed to the idol. And in a way he is. But he continues, but not everyone knows this. Some people are still so accustomed to idols that when they eat such food, they think of it as having been sacrificed to an idol. And since their conscience is weak, it is defiled. He says, I know you know this. He says, but there are others who've grown up inside of that idol culture, and they can't do that without connecting it to worshiping that God. And so it actually defiles their conscience. But food does not bring us near to God. We are no worse if we do not eat, and no better if we do. He says, so the reality is that, yeah, you can do this. He says, but I want you to pay attention not just to the decision you're making. I want you to pay attention to those around you. So listen to how he continues. Be careful, however. This is so significant. That the exercise of your freedom does not become a stumbling block to the weak. For if anyone with a weak conscience sees you who have this knowledge eating in an idol's temple, won't he be emboldened to eat what has been sacrificed to idols? So this weak brother for whom Christ died is destroyed by your knowledge. Is destroyed by your knowledge. When you sin against your brothers in this way, you wound their weak conscience. You sin against Christ. Therefore, if what I eat causes my brother to fall into sin, and then he says something I can't believe, I will never eat meat again. I don't know how he could say that. I mean, that's taking it very far. So that I will not cause him to fall. And Paul walks us through the principle of influence. And he says, I know you've learned some things. And I know that you've learned that, yeah, you're free to do this. And you can do it, and it doesn't cause you to fall. It doesn't cause you to stumble. But it's destroying the people around you. Your knowledge is destroying the people around you. And he teaches us on this journey, you don't just make the decision based on, I can't. Is it right? Is it wrong? We talked about this a couple months ago. The box, no. You don't make decisions based on, is it right? Is it wrong? You make decisions based on what gets me to Jesus, what allows me to love him best, what allows me to be able to know and experience him the most. That's how I make the decision. And Paul says not only that, as you're on this journey, you don't make the decision based on can I, right, wrong. He says, oh, no, you have to pay attention to how it impacts and influences the people around you. And here's what I'll tell you. Some of you, you can live in that system and you can execute the points and you can do all that and you're going to pay it off on time. And it's not going to cause you to overspend. Very few of you are in that bucket, but some of you are in that bucket and it's not going to cause you to overspend and you can live in it and it's not destructive. But when you teach that in your group, it leads others to destruction because they can't do that. They can't do that. And they're not going to pay it off on time. And they are going to overspend. And it's going to lead to exactly what God said it was going to lead to. Slavery. Do you have the freedom to do it? Yeah. But you need to pay attention to your influence. As a pastor, I live with this recognition all the time. I know one day I'm going to stand before God and I'm going to answer to Him as far as what it is that I taught and how I use the influence and the position that He's given me. I know that. But I'm not the only one. We're all going to answer for how we use the influence that He's given us. And so Paul says, don't allow your knowledge to puff you up. Pay attention to those around you. And make sure that you're building them up. And so as a church, we're going to talk about debt and we're going to teach debt the way that God talks about it. We're going to move through it together, talking about Proverbs 22. Just as the rich rule the poor, so the borrower is servant to the lender. And as a church, we must always, not just in this area, in all of life, we must pay attention to the principle of influence. We're going to acknowledge that it's His. We're going to tell it where to go. We're going to work to eliminate debt. And then we're going to give. Part of it is giving. And God teaches us to do this. Bring all the tithes into the storehouse so that there will be enough food in my temple. If you do, says the Lord of heaven's armies, I will open the windows of heaven for you. I will pour out a blessing so great you won't have enough room to take it in. Try it. Put me to the test. We're going to give it our tithe. We're going to make sure, as we talked about a couple weeks ago, we're going to rip those idols out. We're going to make sure that the idols of discontentment are not what get our offerings, but that we bring it to Him. In addition to that, we're going to train our children to manage money God's way. One of the things that I've loved as we've moved through this is that my 15-year-old walked through Financial Peace University in a Sunday evening group. And it's his first time walking through it. He's done the kids' curriculum a little bit, but this is his first time going through exactly what you've been going through. And there were plenty of times where he came home and said, this doesn't really apply to me. The other day he came home and he said, I don't know. I don't need to learn about insurance. Why do I need to learn about insurance? I don't buy insurance. I said, well, if you'd like to pay for it, you can do that. We can start that now. And it's funny, because he demonstrated something that I see a lot, and it's a massive mistake. Almost all of us make it. It usually shows up here at Hoboken Grace when we're moving through a relationship series, because we'll be moving through a relationship series, and as we're moving through it, somebody will come up to me and say, this isn't really for me. I'm not married yet. And I'll say the same thing to them every time. Yes, wait until you get married to learn how to be married. That's a great plan. That's a great plan. And far too many of us do that. We don't learn about it beforehand, we learn about it afterward. And many of us did. We waited to learn about marriage until after we were married. It didn't go well. And I'm so excited for him because he's learning about all these things before he needs to know it, which it turns out is that's the way you're supposed to do it. The other day he came home. He's a freshman in high school, which this kind of blows my mind because they were in the lunch line, and as they're in the lunch line, the girl in front of him pulled out her credit card to pay for lunch. They're freshmen in high school. We did not have credit cards when I was a freshman in high school. We didn't get to that destructive phase until college, but apparently we're destroying our lives sooner. So she pulls out her credit card, and he says, "Why do you have a credit card?" And she said, "Well, I need to build my credit score." And he said, "We need to talk." And I'm so excited that he's learning about this before he experiences that destructive first credit card. I know how long it took me to pay off my first credit card. It took me years. Years. And so we're making the decision as a church. You say, where we're going? No, we're training our kids in this. We're not just interested in learning this ourselves. We're going to train them beforehand so that they don't waste God's resources the way that we look back and realize we have. We're going to train our kids. Proverbs 22:6, direct your children onto the right path, and when they are older, they will not leave it. And then finally, we're going to save and invest. Ecclesiastes 11:2, but divide your investments among many places, for you do not know what risk might lie ahead. Some of you were shocked to realize that the scriptures teach you to diversify your investments. I mean, you were shocked. You're like, seriously, that's in there? That's a verse? Did they even have investments at that time? But our Father has taught us so much as it pertains to this because he wants us to live the life that's truly life. And so we're making the commitment. No, we're going to save. And just like God's called me to give, I'm going to save, and I'm going to invest wisely what it is that I'm saving. Because I'm a steward of God's resources. Another thing that I frequently hear as we move through this conversation is people will come to me and say, "Oh, Financial Peace University just keeps talking about becoming a millionaire. And if I do this," and if you've been inside of the groups, you know this is true. They'll walk through and say, "You're going to invest this, and then you're going to do this, and by this point, you'll be a millionaire. By this point, you'll have $1 million." And people will come up to me and say, "Listen, I'm not interested in being a millionaire. I'm not interested in being a millionaire. That doesn't interest me." Okay, fine. But here's what I'll tell you. Listen to me very carefully. Especially in our church family in this area. Many of us should be. And if we're not, it should be because we gave it away, not threw it away. God has given us the resources to change the mission, to powerfully impact the mission. I don't want to get to the end of this and realize that I threw that away. And so we're making the commitment. No. We're going to be intentional. We're going to save and invest. We're going to follow him. Not just in part of what he calls us to. We're going to follow him in all of what he calls us to as it pertains to our finances. Not just so that we can live the life that's truly life, but so that we can change the world in the process. God doesn't just call you to live the life that's truly life so you can experience it. He calls you to it so that you can bring it to the world. And so as we bring this thing together, I want to invite you to make those commitments with us. To say, I'm on board. That's where I'm going. Some of you have done this in the past. I want to invite you to do it again. And so if you pull out your phone, at the top of the app, you're going to see the Be Rich commitment. And I want to invite you to go ahead, pull them out. Inside of this theater, I can't see you very well, but I can see the lights of your phone. So I will know how many phones are open out there. Pull out that phone and make that commitment. To say, no, this isn't just about this moment. We're going somewhere. He's taking us somewhere. And I want to live the life that's truly life. Will you pray with me? Father, I'm so grateful for the way in which you love us, the way in which you have instructed us. And Father, I pray that as we come to the end of this season, that we truly would chart our course, that we would make that commitment. And Father, I pray that you would continue to lead our family forward. For us to not just commit to that, but for us to live it. In Jesus' name, amen.